Thank you so much, Elsie, for welcoming us and getting us started with today's webinar. And greetings to all who've joined today's session. As Elsie mentioned, I am Labrita White, the Director of the Office for Victims of Crime Tribal Division, and I'm certainly pleased to welcome you to this, our first of four planned webinars to support you in the Tribal Victim Services Set Aside, or as we refer to it commonly as TVSSA application process. It's certainly wonderful to have many current TVSSA grantees to join this session, as well as several tribes who are new to the TVSSA program. We welcome you to this, again, first of a series of pre-application webinars to be hosted this week and next week as you successfully work to complete your applications. And you're actually invited to this particular session and the series of sessions, as well as to apply for TVSSA funding, because you were also successful with completing the population certification process. And your federally recognized tribe, consortium of two or more federally recognized tribes, or designee as a federally recognized tribe, supported your receipt of an invitation to apply for the 2025 TVSSA Grant Award. As shared in the TVSSA Notice of Funding Opportunity published in January and reposted just recently last week on July 29th, the Department of Justice Office for Victims of Crime is making $85 million available for the FY 2025 allocations to fund supportive services for American Indian and Alaska Native victims of crime. As part of OVC's mission to administer grant award programs that are funded by the Crime Victims Fund, which is not appropriated funding, but funds made available by criminal fines and fees paid by convicted federal offenders, each year Congress authorizes OVC to use a portion of that balance of the Crime Victims Fund to support grant programs for victim services. So since FY 2018, Congress created the first set aside from the Crime Victims Fund, again, which we refer to our programming. We refer to the Crime Victims Fund. Sometimes you'll hear us say CVF. To improve services for victims of crime. The program is open only to federally recognized tribes and is administered via a formula. Thus, you received a list with the invitation of the allocation chart to indicate the allocation based on the formula used for this year with the $85 million that's available. We're pleased to announce an increase in available funding for awards by approximately $30 million compared to the $55 million allocated last year, fiscal year 2024. We anticipate awards being made to more than 300 tribal communities to provide a wide range of services for crime victims, from counseling and civil legal assistance to emergency housing and tribal wellness ceremonies. To note, in 2024, we awarded 200 TVSSA grants. TVSSA funds may be used for any purpose directly related to serving victims of crime, and OVC supports its tribal partners in using the funds to provide culturally responsive, linguistically appropriate, and victim-centered services. We know you would agree with us that this tribal-focused program is critical, since some of the highest rates of crime victimization in the U.S. occurs in Indian country. Also, cultural differences, remote locations, and challenging jurisdiction related issues lend to the complexities in serving many tribal communities. TVSSA funding is critical as you can apply to use grant award to provide services for domestic violence and sexual assault victims, pay salaries of victim advocates, run supervised visitation programs to allow children to stay connected to their families. You can also use funds to provide civil legal assistance to crime victims dealing with the repercussions of their victimization. You can use funds to buy emergency groceries or pay for emergency housing. shelter for victims. And you can also use our funding to amend your tribal codes to include stronger victim protections, lease vehicles to transport victims to appointments. Also using funds to hold sings and ceremonies is allowable to help victims connect back with their communities. These tribally run programs through TVSSA can also serve victims of arson, assault, burglary, child abuse, dating violence, elder abuse, and some other crimes that our presentation team will share with you in their review of the notice of funding opportunity, or NOFO, and other information we think it's critical for you to know about on today. Over the years, the OVC Tribal Division has been intentional to learn how to best administer this program through what we learn from consultations, listening sessions, and meetings with tribal leaders and our grantees. We're grateful for the feedback that we receive annually, and we've acted on those requests to make changes on how TVSSA is administered. We've worked to ensure increased effectiveness in promoting justice, safety, and healing for crime survivors in your communities. Substantial changes in how OVC has administered the TVSSA program include a few that I'll share with you this afternoon or this morning. Implementing a policy to allow the use of grant funds to meet the culturally specific needs of tribal communities. This policy applies to certain expenses related to preparing and sharing meals, including indigenous foods, as part of ceremonial responses to crime victims, and purchasing supplies and materials for traditional healing practices and ceremonies. We've also made it possible for tribes to use grant funds for construction costs, such as renovations, purchase of modulars, as well as new construction. We've replaced the competitive process back in 2018 when this program was initially developed. We've replaced that competitive process with a formula process because we heard from tribes of the need to not compete the funding. And so we're pleased to continue in that vein. Revamping the complex grant application process that was keeping many tribes from applying for victim service funding. We've worked over the years to look for ways to streamline and make it less burdensome. The tribal division now offers application support. We've been doing that for the past several years. We also work to decrease the application burden with the replacement of a narrative document with a questionnaire, which includes check boxes and other options for abbreviated responses. Applicants have the flexibility of choosing an award period between 12 and 60 months. We encourage you, definitely as you're planning to make application for FY 2025 funding, to know that if you select a 12-month project period, but you actually truly may need an additional 12 to 24 months, which equates to a 36-month project period, go ahead and submit with that 36-month project period in mind. And just know, if you complete your activities before the end of that project period, we're happy to work with you to close out that program early, and you can continue on with victim services from any prior year funding or future year funding your particular tribe may receive. Essentially, I'm saying, think about how much time it's going to take. Think about potential challenges that may surface, such as locating and hiring, recruiting, and retaining staff. If you know that that may be a challenge, 12 months may not be the most appropriate time frame for your project period. We do leave it to your discretion to make that decision, but just wanted to give you some examples of consideration for longer periods of time in your request for your project period. Expanding the purpose of the grant program to support victim services in missing and murdered Indigenous person cases. is an issue that remains as a top priority for tribal communities as well as for our office. And so we have, last year we eliminated the 3% cap, and that continues on. There is no cap on the utilization or designation of your funds for MMIP related activities. We appreciate, I must say, your interest in the TVSSA program, as demonstrated with the submission of your population certificates earlier in the fiscal year. And we know your participation in today's webinar will provide you with information to enhance your awareness of the components of the TVSSA program. Again, we're delighted to have you join today's webinar. We invite you to attend the remaining sessions of this series of presentations, wherein we will be providing you with information and support around the new proposal narrative questionnaire, budget, your budget worksheets that you'll be developing and submitting, and any, as well as applicable planning that we hope that information will be shared that will be helpful to you if you are considering a construction project. Again, I want to thank you for joining today's webinar. Feel free to reach out to the OVC Tribal Division grant managers and our training and technical assistance providers should you have questions or need assistance. Please know we will work to review your applications in October. As you know, the due date, the deadline for your JustGrants applications is not until September 29th. So in October, we'll be reviewing what you submit to us, and we'll follow up with you should we have any questions. Also note a minor error in the proposal narrative questionnaire regarding the start date for awarded projects, which is October 1st, instead of what you'll see in the questionnaire, September 30th. So there are two options, October 1st of 2025, and January 1 of 2026. We did not want to create a challenge in the application process with that form by correcting it with the reposting, so please forgive us for that. But please know, if you select September 30th, we will know that your request is actually for October 1st. And again, you always, as usual, have the option to start your project January 1, 2026. Please know we appreciate what you do daily in your communities to address the needs of crime victims and survivors. Your trauma-informed, victim-centered advocacy, shelter care, and just a general listening ear brings comfort to those who need it in the most challenging times of their lives. At this time, I am going to introduce to you Janet Rotson, as well as Ramisa Pitts. They are both OVC Tribal Division Grant Management Specialists, and they will provide you with most of the information to be shared in today's webinar presentation. We also have Alexis Pollan, who is also a Grant Management Specialist, who will share with you information about our training and technical assistance services. So at this time, Janet will get us started with today's presentation. Janet?
Thank you, Labrita. Appreciate it. My name is Janet Routson, and as Labrita stated, I'm a grants management specialist for the Tribal Division. I'm also a citizen of the Sicangu Oyate Rosebud Reservation here in the great state of South Dakota. I welcome you all here and so excited to kick off our FY25 TVSSA funding. Next slide, please. Tell you a little bit about the Office for Victims of Crime. OVC raises awareness for crime victims issues and support programs that assist all victims in the aftermath of crime. The office provides leadership and funding for critical services that you need in your community, direct services to victims. We also analyze emerging needs and existing gaps in victim services. We try to identify and replicate the best practices of the wonderful work that is happening in Indian country. and really trying to implement data-driven and technical innovations in victim services. So the Office for Victims of Crime, which is part of the Department of Justice's Office of Justice Programs, OJP, administers the Crime Victims Fund. This is financed by fines and penalties paid by convicted federal offenders and not from tax dollars. This funding supports formula programs to state, territories, and federally recognized tribes, as well as many other OVC discretionary grant programs for victims of crime. Next slide, please. Today's webinar is for federally recognized tribes, their authorized designees, and other tribal consortia that have already submitted their population certification OVC. That signaled your interest in applying for the new Tribal Victim Service Set-Aside Award, and now you're preparing to develop and submit your application. The application process is only open to tribes and federal entities who received an invitation letter to apply for the FY 2025 TVSSA funds. During this presentation, we'll provide the basic information that you need to know how to apply for this award, including an explanation on the purpose and scope of the tribal set-aside funding, an overview of the application submission process and required documents. We're also going to present some tools and resources that can assist you along the way. And as we're going through the slides, we will pause periodically to see if there are any questions that are coming up on the Q&A. Please use the Q&A feature below on the menu. We want to be respectful of your time, and we will end promptly at 3 p.m. Eastern time. Don't forget that a recording of this presentation and the materials will be available within 5 days on the OVC website. First, I want to just provide, and Labrita already gave some of this information about the basic federal award information from the Notice of Funding Opportunity, which we also call a NOFO. And what is important for you to know. This year, the fiscal year 2025, has slightly over $85 million in funding available to distribute as grants through the OVC Tribal Victim Set-Aside Program. This year also, we've had over 300 tribes and tribal serving entities expressing interest in applying for the funding by submitting a population certification, which documented the size of the tribe and the population to be served. On July 29th, OVC emailed out these invitations to the 315 eligible applicants with a link to the NOFO and a link to the allocation chart, which is listed the name, the tribal designee or consortia, and the amount of funding allocated for their individual application. The allocation chart is available on the OVC Tribal Victims Set-Aside webpage, and we will place the link in the chat so that you will be able to see how much funds were being allocated to your particular tribe or consortia. As Labrita mentioned, we have more applications this year than we've had before, and the 85 million is split between all the tribes depending on your population. Next slide, please. This slide includes the formal name of the NOFO, the opportunity ID, the CDFFA numbers, CDFDA numbers that you will need to apply. We will post a link to the NOFO in the chat, and it also will be posted to the OVC website within the Tribal Victim Service Set-Aside webpage. Please review the NOFO carefully because it provides access to all the information that you will need to develop and submit your application, as well as access to critical forms and links to where to apply. Again, as Labrita mentioned, the period of performance will depend on how you're planning to use your funds. For most of you, you will be starting, your start date will be January 1st, 2026. Your end date could be a minimum of 12 months, 1 year, or a maximum of 60 months, 5 years. Again, please give consideration to the potential challenges you may have in completing your project within 12 or 24-month period. We do offer project period extensions, but they may be challenging. So be as realistic as possible when selecting the number of years for your project period. We want you to just take a moment to remind everyone that these awards will be made as new grants, and therefore applicants should plan to manage their expenses, track their performance on these new awards separately from your existing OVC grants. Funds can be used to expand or enhance existing programs or services or create new ones, but they cannot be used to supplant or duplicate activities funded by states or other federal grant awards. Next slide, please. The OVC Victim Set-Aside Formula Grant Program, also known as TVSSA program, provides support to tribal communities to enhance services for victims of crime through activities that address the needs of the wide variety of crime victims in our tribal communities. These awards can be used to improve services for victims of crime through direct services, traditional healing practices, needs assessments and strategic planning, developing and implementing new programs for crime victims, expanding your existing programs, conducting community outreach and education, training for service providers about crime victimization and available services, purchasing or procuring tangible items or supplies related to victim services, and other activities needed to address the individual needs of victims of any type of crime in tribal communities. We are encouraging you to use these grant funding to support trauma-informed and victim-centered services that reflect your tribal community's culture, values, and traditions. Next slide, please. The Tribal Victim Set-Aside program has some unique features. Grant awards are funded through the set-aside designated by law from the Crime Victims Fund. The Crime Victims Fund is not funded by taxpayer dollars, but from fines and fees paid by persons who are convicted in federal courts. The sole purpose of the set-aside is to improve services for victims of crimes in tribal communities. This program is non-competitive and is administered as a formula program. Many grant programs have shorter time limits on the number of years that awards can be used. This program allows use of funds from anywhere between 1 to 5 years, and you are encouraged to consider not selecting 1 year project period to ensure that you have enough time to complete your hiring and other project activities. If project activities are complete prior to the end of the second, third, or fourth, or fifth year, the grant can be successfully closed at that time. We have a 2-phase application process. And guess what? If you're here today, you have already completed the first phase, and that was successfully completing your population certification. The second phase of the application process is where we are now. You're going to be developing your application and preparing to apply for funding through our 2 systems. That is Grants.gov and JustGrants. To simplify the application process, the program narrative must be submitted by using the questionnaire form in JustGrant. We're going to share the instructions on how to complete that. Next slide, please. Since the Tribal Set-Aside program began in 2018, OVC has made hundreds of TVSSA awards, which now provide healing services for thousands of victims in tribal communities across the United States. The type of crime victims that can be served with OVC grant funds is very broad. An applicant may choose to submit a grant proposal that addresses all types of crimes in their tribal community, or you could choose to address a specific type of crime, like sexual assault or domestic violence or MMIP. Or you can also develop a specific new service to address a particular crime. Funds can also be used to access training and professional development for your staff to help build the capacity to serve any type of crime victim. Next slide, please. This slide provides some examples of services and supports that can be provided to crime victims with TVSSA funding. This list is not exhaustive, but gives you an idea of all the different types of services crime victims often need in the aftermath of a crime. And it also gives you an idea of the different strategies tribes are taking to meet their needs of crime victims in their community. TVSS grantees are using funds to pay the salaries for victim advocates, including victim advocates based in law enforcement agencies. They're using them to pay for transportation, medical care, shelter for victims of domestic violence and sexual assault. It's also used to fund culturally relevant support groups and counseling for adult survivors of child abuse or sexual abuse, including elders and adults who were abused at residential boarding schools. It's being used to develop multidisciplinary teams to respond to certain types of crimes, including responding to families of missing and murdered Indigenous persons. Please refer to page 6 through 8 in the NOFO for examples of activities that the TVSSA funds could support families of MMIP. It's used to pay for legal services for victims, amend tribal codes to ensure stronger protection for victims. It's used also to pay for remodeling, renovation, or construction-related spaces where victim services will be provided. Please see page 8 through 9 of the NOFO for more information about the scope of construction that can be funded and the special conditions that will be placed on the award as the project moves through a review process. We'll mention again this briefly later on in the webinar, but we will also offer a separate webinar for anyone hoping to submit an application related to construction or renovation. That will be next week. We'll talk about the date and time later. Grantees are encouraged to use your funds to help fill gaps in services that are needed by crime victims in your community. What is it that crime victims in your community need that you cannot provide through existing programs? Could this grant be used to fill those gaps? Next slide, please. All right, we are going to pause here. Carmen, do we have any questions that need to be answered that you haven't already answered?
Yes, we do, Janet. And this question seems to come a few times. So the question is, if we were able to submit the full application by the originally posted 5/14/25 deadline, do we need to reapply under this new posting in order to be considered?
No. So if you had already submitted a full application, and one of my other coworkers can help me, correct me if I'm wrong, I would suggest you go in, and Labrita, I think they have to go back and adjust grants. And we do want you to make sure that you have submitted all the documentation that you need. I have personally reviewed some of those applications, fully applied for applications, and several of them this year were requiring you to submit a separate timeline, and some grantees did not do that. So I would ask you to take an opportunity to go back in and make sure that you have all your attachments, that everything is filled out fully. But go ahead, Labrita. I think they have to request it. I believe.
Right, there's an option to recall your application, and that information is available, the instructions in the applicant resource guide that was shared with you as an attachment when you received the invitation email to apply. So please take a look at that document. We'll talk about that recall process a little bit more in tomorrow's webinar. In regards to grants.gov, if you previously submitted an application, we did not have the allocations available at that time. So the allocation chart was also made available to you with the invitation notification. So if you can update your SF424 in grants.gov, that would be greatly appreciated. Feel free to reach out to us directly should you have more specific questions about that process.
And also your budget. So if you fully submitted and you submitted your budget also, you now have an allocated amount, and we would ask you to go back in and to revise those budgets to match your SF 424 and the allocation that you are eligible for. Anything else, Carmen?
Yes, there is a question. Do we need to submit a tribal council resolution in order to apply?
I believe for consortiums need a tribal resolution. I believe that if you are a federally recognized tribe, you do not need a resolution. Is that correct, Labrita?
So the actual the tribal council resolutions should have been submitted during the population certification process. And so if that is outstanding, it would be great if you could submit that with your application.
Carmen?
Yeah, no, thank you. I'm looking to see if there is any other questions. I think you answered a lot of them.
I did see one.
I see one. Can the
Go ahead.
fiscal year 25 set aside funds be added to an existing program funded from TVSSA fiscal year 23 and fiscal year 25?
Okay, I'll jump in and help you with that one if you need me, Janet.
Yeah, go
Okay,
ahead, Labrita.
sure. Okay, so for the FY 2025 TVSSA funds, there should be a plan for use of those dollars independent of your of a 2023 or other grants, but the services can be similar, right? And so if you were, I won't give an example, but if you submit for the 2025, those funds are pretty much a standalone for whatever the project period you select, whether it's 1 year up to 5 years. But you can, again, apply those funds towards some of the similar victim services you were approved to provide under, for instance, in your question, your FY 2023 grant. But again, if you have more specific questions about that and you have a grant manager that's assigned to your 2023 grant, please reach out to that person for a further discussion. Thanks for that question.
Anything else outstanding, Carmen, you think we should address that you're not able to in the chat or question?
Okay, so another question is, can we use this funding to build an office and safe house for victims of crime and the workers?
Yes. So, and next week we will be having a webinar on the construction rules and regulations that surround that. And we will be giving you those dates and times later. They'll be more specific. It's a little bit more complicated, but these funds are allowed to be used for construction or renovation for spaces where victims can be served.
Right, for victims to be served, and office space only for staff, and housing for victims and family members. Okay.
And I think this is the last question for now, Janet, because I know you want to move forward with the presentation. But before we ask, we wanted to do an interview over a written application. So I'm just verifying that the interview option is no longer available now. Is that correct?
That is correct. And the lateness of the application, but your grant manager is here to assist you. And I think what you're going to find is that the questionnaire, which we're going to be talking about, there's a whole another webinar on that is now inserted in JustGrants rather than a checklist or the traditional narrative is a lot easier, simpler to answer. But of course, you always have the ability to call a grant manager. If you are a new grantee and you don't already have a grant manager, please utilize our OVC email address, and we absolutely, they'll talk more about our technical assistance providers. They also will assist you. All right, let's move on. Thank you for all those great questions. Some of them had me stumped. Just goes to show you, we don't know everything. So we're going to talk here about your actual application process. The first place, there's 3 different steps, and that includes sam.gov, Grants.gov, and JustGrants. Those are the 3 systems that we use. First, sam.gov, where you submit a new registration if you're new to the federal grant awards or where you want to update or confirm an existing registration. And this is also where you obtain or confirm your entity's UEI number. Everything entered into sam.gov cascades through Grants.gov and JustGrants. They're all connected. In order to submit an application in Grants.gov, all applicants must register with the System of Award Management, that is sam.gov. You must renew your registration every 12 months. So you want to make sure how long ago that was and make sure it's updated. And if you do not renew your sam.gov registration, it will expire. An expired registration can delay or prevent an application submission in Grants.gov and JustGrants. You are encouraged to start with sam.gov registration process at least 30 days prior to the application deadline. It may take at least 10 days to update your registration in sam.gov, so please start this process now so that you're not going to have any problems later. Once you've located a funding opportunity with DOJ, you will submit your SF 424 in Grants.gov, your SFLLL in JustGrants. The sam.gov registration procedures can be accessed in www.sam.gov. The person who registers in sam.gov becomes the e-business point of contact. It's called the e-biz POC, who can assign the people who will submit the applications for the organization. Please complete your sam.gov registration by September 8th if you haven't already registered. We also want to talk about Grants.gov. This is where you search for funding opportunities and select the funding ID, and you submit your forms. You will find complete instructions on how to register in Grants.gov and submit an application. If you go to www.grants.gov applicants. Third, JustGrants is where you submit the remaining documents needed for the full application package and then manage the grant after it's awarded. You will have 2 application submission deadlines. One is for Grants.gov and one is for JustGrants. Your SF 424 deadline is Monday, September 22nd by 8:59 p.m. Eastern Standard Time. The JustGrants application is due September 29th by 8:59 p.m. Eastern Standard Time. Once the first application forms have been submitted and validated in Grants.gov, the application package will be sent to JustGrants for completion. It may take several days for Grants.gov to complete validation and release it to JustGrants, which is why we have two different application deadlines. Please work to submit before the due dates to allow times to address any technical issues. Next slide, please. Again, I want to highlight the deadline dates, which you see here. On the first page of the NOFO, the Notice of Funding Opportunity, it outlines the major deadlines and dates you need to be aware of. Similar to all OJP grants, OVC is following the required two-step submission process. The Grants.gov deadline, again, is September 22nd, and JustGrants, September 29th. We expect to make all award announcements by September 30th, and for most applicants, your project start date will be January 1st, 2026. If your tribe or organization has a current TVSSA award that will expire September 30th, 2025, and you therefore need an earlier start date for your 2025 award to prevent any lapses in services, please contact your OVC grant manager and discuss the earlier start date of October 1st. Once the award is made, please contact the OVC grant manager listed in JustGrants and work with them to have your budget cleared and address any outstanding special conditions you may have. Next slide, please. Your SF 424 is a required standard form. Any submission of any pre-applications, applications. This is in Grants.gov. This information is used to populate the applicant's profile. So we need to make sure that all the information is correct. We want to make sure this is also where you decide how long your project is going to be. And so all the dates and amounts should match also your budget worksheet. You'll get the information for the amount to place in here out of the allocation list, which either it has already or will be in the chat, a link to that. In section F of the SF 424, please include the name and contact information of the individual who complete the application materials in JustGrants. JustGrants will use this information, the email addresses, to assign the application to this user in JustGrants. September 22nd is the deadline for the SF 424. Don't forget, your performance period can be between 12 and 60 months. Each applicant is also required to fill out in JustGrants the lobbying form, the SFLLL. In years prior, this form was available in Grants.gov, but it is now in JustGrants. All applicants must disclose the existence or non-existence of lobbying activities by completing and submitting the form SFLLL. To download the disclosure for lobbying activities, please visit the link that will be provided. Each applicant must complete and submit this information. An applicant that expends any funds for lobbying activities is to provide all the information requested on the disclosure of lobbying activity form, which is completed in JustGrants.gov. If an applicant does not expend any funds for lobbying activities, it is to enter N/A in the text boxes for item 10. Next slide, please. Now that we covered the application submission process, I want to touch on what should be included in your application. At a minimum, applicants must include a budget detailed worksheet and an application timeline. In years prior, the project timeline was included in the narrative or in the checklist. This year, you have to attach it separately. And as I mentioned earlier in my review of some of the completed applications in JustGrants, there were tribes that forgot to attach those. And I'm sure it's because it's new. It's not something that you've had to do before. So please make sure that you are separately attaching those timelines. If you are proposing to use TVSSA funds for renovation or construction activities, including the purchase, installation, and site preparation for modular buildings, mobile homes, trailer homes, or other prefabricated structures, you must complete and upload the separate TVSSA construction renovation questionnaire in addition to filling out the questionnaire in JustGrants. And for those of you who are experienced OJP grantee knows typically an award is made, but if we are missing any of these items, we will have to hold funds until we get them. So make sure you attach that filled out budget detailed worksheet, that the funds in that worksheet, the amount match your SF 424 and your allocated amount, that you separately attach the project timeline and the construction project questionnaire if you are proposing a project. But this year, you do not have to attach a checklist or a narrative because it is going to be filled out. The project narrative questionnaire is going to be filled out in JustGrants. Next slide, please. So again, as I mentioned, the proposal narrative questionnaire is something new this year. The instructions, an example of information, also can be found in your TVSSA applicant resource guide. For additional information on how to respond to this questionnaire, please join us tomorrow, August 7th at 2 p.m. The registration link will also be placed in the chat. We'd love to have you and go through how, I'm just going to mention briefly how this is done or what needs to be done. So key information that needs to be in this is the key elements of your project, the descriptions of the issues and needs in the population. In the population you're serving. What's the design of your project, the where and the how, your project goals and objectives. If you look at page 15 through 18 in the NOFO, it will set out every single question that is in the questionnaire. Also, what is going to be provided to you is an example of a filled out questionnaire and a Word document template that you can use. So you can actually use that Word document, fill it out on your own, copy and paste it into JustGrants. So make sure you see pages 15 through 18. This is kind of what it looks like in JustGrants. This is a screenshot of the new project narrative questionnaire. And again, we're having that webinar tomorrow to help you, but you can also reach out to your grant manager or to our TA providers to assist you if you're having a hard time trying to answer any of these questions or if it's not making sense. I've heard from some applicants that have fully filled this out and they said it was pretty easy. So hopefully you won't have any problems with it. Next slide, please. Here's, you must submit that timeline separately again as an attachment. You need to include your project activities, any major milestones that will be carried out through the length of the proposed project period. We are going to provide a template for your use. And we want to make sure that you understand the instructions in the NOFO, so make sure you're reading. Also, the applicant resource guide takes you and also gives you an example of this timeline. Next. All right. Your construction process. Your proposed, if anybody's interested. All applicants proposing to use these funds for renovation or construction activities, including the purchase, installation, site preparation for modular buildings, prefabricated structures, trailer homes, must complete and upload the separate TVSSA construction renovation questionnaire that will be provided to you in addition to your timeline. For applicants that select to schedule to use this, if you are having any issues, please reach out to your grant manager. But again, next week, on August 13th at 2 p.m., we are also offering a webinar so that you can learn more information about how to do a construction progress with these funds. This session will provide you with all the information that you'll need. You'll also hear from our 2 TA providers that will assist you throughout the whole construction process, what the requirements are, thinking about the different timelines that you need if you want to participate in a construction process. Next slide, please. So I am going to turn over this presentation to my coworker, Ramisa. Thank you for listening, and reach out if you have any questions.
Thank you, Janet, and hello, everyone. So we will continue on. I will continue on with this presentation and talk about some more specific information as it relates to the budget and developing your budget. We asked when developing your budget that you use the Excel budget detail worksheet. The budget detail worksheet clearly allows you to break down the cost of your budget by the budget year. For your budget, you are required to include travel this year for a minimum of 1 to 2 key personnel. That means those individuals who are serving victims and working under the Victim Service Program to attend at least one of the OVC required trainings for each year of your award. At this time, we do not have a specific location for these events, so please use Washington, D.C. as your destination for travel. If you happen to have any questions about your particular budget or allowable costs, I highly encourage you to join the upcoming Developing Your Budget webinar scheduled for August 12th at 2 p.m. Eastern Standard Time. Next slide, please. So, as mentioned, the budget guidance chart, which is a reference guide for allowable and unallowable costs, has been developed by OVC. It is important to remember that the TVSSA program may be used for a wide range of programs, activities, equipment, and supplies to develop, enhance, sustain, or procure victim services. To assist applicants in determining what is allowable and what is not allowable, OVC has developed a list of examples of costs that could be included in the budgets of TVSSA applicants. We have broken the examples down by budget category. To assist with this, OVC has created an example list of allowable and unallowable activities under the TVSSA program. So while the list is not an all-inclusive list, it does provide some sort of general guidance on what costs and activities would be considered allowable or unallowable. Also, I encourage you, as you are developing your budgets, to think about how you want to use the TVSSA funds, and think about 3 questions. One of the questions is this cost or activity related to supporting or assisting crime victims? The second one is, how is the cost related to the proposed project? Meaning, does it align with the goals and the objectives in your proposal narrative? And the other question is, how does the expense help crime victims? So think about those 3 questions. Also, for more information about allowable and unallowable activities, as a reminder, OVC and the Tribal Financial Management Center, known as TFMC, will be hosting a webinar on August 12th, again at 2 p.m. Eastern Standard Time, to discuss costs and provide more information about budgets. So please register for this upcoming webinar if you are interested in learning more about how to create a budget and budget narrative that satisfies the DOJ guidance or guidelines and the requirements. Next slide, please. So again, while these funds can be used to provide a wide range of services for victims of crime, there are some statutory limitations on how the funds can be used. So this slide pretty much summarizes the costs and activities that are statutorily prohibited under grant programs funded through the Crime Victims Fund, and some activities of cost that are generally unallowable within the TVSSA grant projects or within those budgets. So some examples include offender services not related to victimization, costs associated with law enforcement investigation or prosecution activities, equipment to support law enforcement activities or to monitor perpetrators of a crime, costs associated with operating a court or correctional facility, probation or parole units, legal services for criminal defense and tort actions. Primary prevention activities are also prohibited. Food, beverages, meals, refreshments provided at meetings, conferences, or trainings are also unallowable. Trinkets such as hats, t-shirts, mugs, gift bags, giveaways at meetings, conferences, or trainings are also unallowable. Lobbying is unallowable as well. Funding activities or fundraising of activities is also an unallowable expense, and consultant costs exceeding allowable DOJ rates is also one of those things that is unallowable under the TVSSA program. So please keep in mind that the focus of the funding is on improving the response to victims after a crime occurs. All outreach and education to the community should be to increase the awareness and understanding about crime victim issues and inform the community about the services available to assist victims. So if your application contains unallowable costs or activities, OVC will ask you to remove those items from your actual budget. So please review the NOFO. It is important to review the NOFO, more specifically the budget guidance chart, carefully so that you know how to develop your budget appropriately. Also, I would like to bring to your attention that OVC has updated the NOFO and the budget guidance chart, formerly known as the unallowable cost chart, to provide greater detail about the ways TVSSA funds can be used to support services to families of MMIP and to support renovation or construction activities. So please take a look at that carefully. OVC staff are on standby to answer your questions that you may have about the allowability or cost items that may be unallowable or questionable within your budget. If you are a current grantee, please reach out to your OVC grant manager. I think you know who that person is. If you are a new applicant, please email the Tribal Financial Management Center, known as TFMC, or you can send an email to the OVC Tribal Victim Services Set Aside email inbox, and someone will put you in contact with an individual who can assist with your questions. Both of those links will be added to the chat. Next slide, please. So as previously mentioned, TVSSA funds can be used to provide a wide range of services for victims of crime. There are, again, some statutory limitations on how the funds can be used. This slide summarizes the costs and activities that are statutorily prohibited under grant programs funded through the Crime Victims Fund, and some activities of costs that are generally unallowable. So some of those examples include the offender services not related to victimization, costs associated with law enforcement investigation or prosecution activities, equipment to support law enforcement activities or to monitor perpetrators of a crime. There are some others that are mentioned here, but for the sake of time, I will not continue on with those. I will move to the next slide if that's okay. So now, new as of FY 2024, the Financial Management and System of Internal Controls Questionnaire, also known as the Financial Capability Questionnaire or the FCQ, is a required document that should be completed in a web-based form in JustGrants inside of the application. This form includes a yes or no, and if the grantee or applicant is deemed as a high risk by any federal grant-making agency, you can explain the reason for your high risk designation. Next slide, please. So this slide brings, I would like to bring to your attention from this slide, the certifications, disclosures, and assurances forms that are now embedded in JustGrants and must be completed by each applicant. The disclosure of lobbying activities form, this is a yes/no question, and if the applicant selects yes, then you will be required to complete this form in JustGrants. The disclosure of duplication in cost items form is embedded directly in JustGrants, and this will be discussed on the very next slide. The DOJ Certified Standard Assurances form, this is where the applicant should review and accept the DOJ assurances in JustGrants. The DOJ certifications on lobbying, debarment, suspension, and other responsibility matters form is embedded directly in JustGrants and requires the review and signature of the applicant. The applicant disclosure and justification form, which is the DOJ high risk for grantees form, must be submitted and uploaded in JustGrants if the entity is deemed as a high risk applicant. So this form is not embedded in JustGrants, but if you are deemed as a high risk grantee, please remember to upload this form into JustGrants. And as a special added note, please also remember to review the applicant's resource guide for more guidance or information as needed on any of these forms. Next slide, please. So as mentioned before, I'll talk about the disclosure of duplication form again. The disclosure of duplication in cost items form, this is where you as the applicant would disclose if there is a duplicate application of potential funding for the same project and activities. So please be mindful of that. If so, then you will be required to note that. Next slide, please. The declaration and certification form is simply where the applicant certifies that the information in your actual application is true to the best of your knowledge. Next slide, please. So I just want to mention that it is it's very, very important to remember that the application submitter will need to complete the application by entering data into the web-based forms. And that application submitter will upload the attachments. That individual will accept the assurances and certifications. The application submitter will also need to select the authorized representative or representatives. Once all sections are completed, the application submitter will submit the actual application. Upon successful submission of the application submitter, entity administrator, and the authorized representative or representatives will also receive an email from JustGrants confirming submission of the application. Next slide, please. I'm sorry. So after you have submitted your application, you are probably wondering what's next. So once all of the applications have been reviewed, then the entity will be notified. The notification will be sent to the entity prior to September 30th. The system will also notify the application submitter, the entity administrator, and the authorized representatives or representative, depending on if you have one or multiple representatives, when the application has been received in JustGrants. The entity administrator will receive notification on when the award notification has been sent. If you have submitted your application, the application status in JustGrants will be reflected as submitted. So you may also see a banner that indicates that it is past due. If that application is past due, if you've submitted again successfully, you will receive notification that your application has been submitted. Next slide, please. So we will take a moment and pause again to see if we have any questions. Carmen, do we have any new questions that may have come in?
We had a lot of questions, Ramisa, but staff have been responding. I'm just gonna share one here and see if we can get Labrita or you or Janet to respond. I submitted the Grants.gov. I submitted to the Grants.gov before the June deadline. Do I have to resubmit it, or will the grant application in JustGrants that open with the June Grants.gov submission be available to use? I see I can access on JustGrants, but just want to confirm, since there have been so many changes in the deadline this last year. I think so. If I understood correctly, it's asking if they can access the application from JustGrants and resubmit.
If I could recall correctly, you should have access to that application in JustGrants. If not, I would go back and double check to make sure you do have access. If you do, then you can move forward with submitting the application documents and submit that application successfully in JustGrants. Labrita, did I miss anything?
Just want to add to what you said. JustGrants, yes, but also I think the question was relative primarily to Grants.gov. It actually referenced both. So you should be able to, as an applicant, go back in and recall your Grants.gov as well as your Grants application submissions and make any necessary corrections. I think I shared from a similar question earlier that you would most likely need to go into Grants.gov to update the federal award requested amount to make certain it's consistent with the allocations that were made available in the allocation chart. How to recall your application, we'll cover a little bit of that in tomorrow's webinar, but also there was an OVC applicant resource guide attached to the invitation email. And if you take a look at that information, it gives more specific instructions on how to recall and resubmit. Okay.
Thank you, Labrita. Carmen, do we have any other questions?
Yes. Can you give us an example of preventable programs that are allowable?
The TVSSA funding does not, the allowability of prevention is not allowed under the TVSSA program. So I don't know what the more specific question may be. I would just say if it's a more detailed question that you would reach out to your OVC grant manager if you are a pre-existing grantee. If you are a new applicant, I would say to reach out to the tribal set-aside inbox with your more specific project that you have in mind, and someone can help you with that question.
Thank you, Ramisa. Another question is, will a newly established SANE program be considered an eligible activity? I can answer that. That's usually we fund a SANE program under CTAS, Purpose Area 6, which is working more with child abuse, child sexual abuse cases. However, if you don't have a CTAS Purpose Area 6 award, yes, you can use TVSSA funds to fund a SANE program. And Labrita or anybody else, if you can correct me if I'm wrong with that. Okay, Ramisa, are you ready? There is another question.
Yes.
Do you have more time? Okay. Am I
Yes.
able to do a GAM if the status of the award is pending active? Not necessarily relevant, just a random thought.
This
So
is
for that
definitely
question, I think Ramis will probably say about the same. I would say check in with your grant manager directly because it's your question seems to be related to a currently active grant. Thank you for that question, but please check in with your grant manager. Thank you.
correct. Correct. Thank you, Labrita. Okay, Carmen, in the interest of time, I would like to move forward. We may have a little more time at the end of the presentation for a few more questions.
Okay, thank you.
All right. And so this next section, we're going to go into, or I'm going to talk about, will relate to the tools and resources. So next slide, please. So as you remember, the SAM.gov registration is part one of the actual process. So Grants.gov uses the SAM to verify the business information for organizations wishing to apply for grants. So if you need help with creating a new SAM account and logging into the SAM system, please contact the Federal Service Desk. Their information in terms of the phone number and the email address is actually listed in the slide. And remember that the SAM registration must be completed by Monday, September 8th. Also, as it relates to tools and resources, there is also the Grants.gov customer service helpline or help desk. Their support information is also listed in the slide. It has their email address and their phone number as well. Next slide, please. So more information as it relates to our support service desk. There is also a JustGrants support service desk. Their information is also on the slide, which has the email address and phone number as well. And just as a reminder, the application deadline is set for Monday, September 29th at 8:59 p.m. and that is Eastern Standard Time. Next slide, please. So we also do have some office hours to support you with completing your application. Applicants have the option of attending a virtual office hour session. During the office hour session, applicants will receive technical assistance with their TVSSA application, such as or assistance with completing the proposal narrative questionnaire that has come up several times within this webinar. The budget and budget narrative can also be discussed at that time. This assistance will be provided by the OVC grant managers and training and technical assistance providers. The set date for that is September 4th of this year at 2 p.m. to 4 p.m. Eastern Standard Time. So it's important to remember that we're on Eastern Standard Time. The link to this session should be or will be dropped in the chat. Next slide, please. And before I go further into that next slide, I also just wanted to make mention again of the upcoming webinars, to please pay close attention to those dates and please register if you have any questions or any concerns about your application and how to submit. And so as it relates to the upcoming webinars, we have 3 more TVSSA NOFA webinars scheduled for you. The first or the next webinar is scheduled for August the 7th, which is tomorrow, and that is the webinar on completing a proposal narrative questionnaire. We also have the Developing Your Budget webinar, which is scheduled for Wednesday, August 12th at 2 p.m. And we also have the Considerations for Construction Projects scheduled for Wednesday, August the 13th. And remember again that all of the webinars are scheduled for 2 p.m. Eastern Standard Time. So now I will turn it over to my colleague Alexis, who will share some additional resources. Alexis, take it away.
So thank you, everybody, for joining. You've had such incredibly thoughtful questions. It's just a reminder that we have training and technical assistance providers that are funded through OVC that are ready to assist you with these thoughtful questions that you've been posing, whether it's the application process, it's thinking through your programming, or your budget. And so the first one we wanted to remind everyone about is the Tribal Victim Services Training and Technical Assistance Program, otherwise known as TVISTA. TVISTA provides tailored assistance to tribal grantees and potential grantees and has over 100 years of combined experience in victim services. Next slide, please. How can TVISTA support you? TVISTA provides tailored, victim-centered, and trauma-informed assistance to tribal grantees and potential grantees. They can give you assistance with topic-focused webinars that are able to be put out to our grantees year-round. They can help you answer questions about what should go into your program narrative questionnaire, that question that people have been posing about prevention-related services and how that applies to victim services is a perfect kind of question for TVISTA. They can route you towards your grant manager if you're not sure who's assigned to you at that time. They also assist with thinking through how to achieve your specific program goals, such as policies and procedures workshops or taking a look at your intake forms. Really, it is a worthwhile resource for you to think about what your goals are and what you need assistance with in order to be able to provide the services in the community that you want to. You can also reach out to them for grant navigation related help. So whether that is with, again, your application, program documentation, even modifications. So please do make use of them. If you have questions about, again, this application process, it is always best to reach out to your grant manager, but TVISTA, again, is there to assist you. If you want to, you can always pull out your phone right now. You can connect with them via a QR code. We will also be sure to send you a copy of the links to their website, their support email and phone number as well. There will be a follow-up email to this webinar that will contain contact information for T-Vista as well. And you can also see that information now placed into the chat. We also have the Tribal Financial Management Center, or TFMC. They provide individualized training and technical assistance as well, but as their name suggests, it is more focused on budget. So a lot of those questions that you all were posing related to allowable costs, they would be a perfect resource for you in thinking through how to construct a budget that can get cleared as swiftly as possible and what can be afforded with under the Tribal Victim Set Aside Award. They are also available for FY25 TVSSA application support. And as you can see, the email address is on that slide if you already know that you have questions for them and want help in thinking through your budget and the budget detail worksheet. Also, they have a number of, if you do visit their website, a number of topical resource pages that are 1 to 2 page long. So they really do a deeper dive into a number of different subjects, such as indirect cost rates. If you're thinking about purchasing a vehicle or, purchasing versus leasing a vehicle and need assistance in how to effectively communicate that with your grant manager and to be able to have those funds released for that vehicle. They have all kinds of helpful tips and specific resources, including micro learnings as well. So do not hesitate to reach out. Are there any last minute reminders or questions that anyone would like to pose from the OVC team? Ramisa, I think I'm going to kick it back over to you in case you have some in mind, including the Grants.gov application deadline and the JustGrants application deadline.
Yes, thank you, Alexis. So just a few quick reminders. The SAM.gov registration deadline is September 8th. The Grants.gov application deadline is September 22nd at 8:59 p.m. Eastern Standard Time. The JustGrants application deadline is set for September 29th at 8:59 p.m. Eastern Standard Time. So please be mindful of those deadlines as they relate to submitting your documents. Also, I just want to reiterate the upcoming webinars. You all have that information. Just to be respectful of time, I won't go through that again. But please register and join us if you are interested in learning more about how to submit your application, what to look for, those questions that you have as it relates to your budget, if you have any construction questions, things of that nature. We thank you for joining us today. Do we have any last minute questions, Carmen? We do have about 2 minutes, but again, I would like to be respectful of everyone's time. Thank you. And we thank you again for joining us for our first kickoff webinar as it relates to the FY25 TVSSA program. We will give you back the rest of your time, 1 minute. Thank you and take care, and hopefully we'll see you soon.